This is where I'm going to run you through finance management as part of our The Folio Explained series. Now, before you start this video, if you haven't already got yourself prepared, pause the video, go get yourself a calculator, get yourself pen and paper, and make sure you've got a copy of the prices for the timber parts that have been supplied by your teacher. If you haven't had them supplied, you can always use the Bunnings website to get your prices, or any other timber supplier. Trend Timber, for example, have their prices publicly available on their website. So go and get the price list. For us, in our particular folio, we've provided that to you, and you can see that available in your assessment task. In this particular lesson, I'm going to show you through a few different concepts. Firstly, we need to understand what a linear meter is and how that is different from just buying our timber by the meter. Secondly, we need to work out why the project cost can't actually be calculated until you've done your drawings. So a little bit of a strange one there. We quite often do our drawings after we've done our finance management, but realistically, your finance management needs to be done after you've got your drawings completed, like if you were giving you the drawings for this project. You need to think about and understand how to actually do a cutting list and why we include wastage in our calculations and what that wastage calculation is actually for. And at the end of it, once you've finished and you've understood and you've learnt that, you should be able to go off and actually do the project costing for your own project. So let's get started with a little bit of an understanding about finance management. We need to start with the idea that you cannot just get a budget and pull it out of thin air. Now, a budget is a document that lists all of the different things you want to spend money on and how much you think they're going to cost. Now, I can't just say, oh, I'm going to buy some timber, so that might cost $500. What timber am I buying? How much of it am I buying? I need that information before I can just come up with that number. Now, if I know that I need 10 metres of timber, how much does the timber actually cost per metre? I need that information before I can go and do my calculations as well. So you can see a budget isn't just pulled out of thin air. It's calculated based on data and information that we have available to us. Now, why do we need to do a budget? Well, look, if you're running a business and you prepare to charge a client $1,000 to make an entertainment unit, but it costs you $1,500 to make it because you didn't plan your project properly, then you're going to be losing money as a company. You're actually putting $500 of your own money to finish the project for the customer. And you can't just turn around and say, oh, I need you to pay more money. That's not fair to the client. They gave you a budget, you need to design within it. And when you're planning and you do your budget, if you just can't build it for the price that they're willing to offer, have the conversation with the client and say, look, I've done all of the drawings, I've done all of the planning, it's going to cost you another $100. Are you willing to spend that? And if the client says yes, happily that increases your budget by $100. But if they say no, you say, well, we need to start thinking maybe we can't make it out of spotted gum, maybe we need to pick a cheaper timber like pine, for example. And so you start having those conversations with your client about ways that we can reduce the cost. And my favourite quote here, if you fail to prepare, you're actually preparing yourself to fail. So we need to make sure we don't fail, and we do that by preparing really well. So you've probably seen this document, okay, or a similar document to this. This is effectively our costing sheet in total. You can see the green table there is our costing sheet. I've broken it up and I've put a little rectangle around the left section. That's just our cutting list. All that we've got there is each of the pieces of our timber for our project, how many of them we need, and their dimensions, length, width, thickness, and what material they're being made for. That is just a cutting list, no surprises there. You've done cutting lists plenty of time, so you should know how to produce a cutting list. Okay? Now remember, cutting list happens before we do our costings. You can't do your cutting list until you've got your drawings. So you need to make sure, start with your drawings, then do your cutting list, and then you move on to your costings there. Once we've got that sorted, we then move across to the right-hand part of it. And this is where we start actually costing out our project. The costing sheet uses meters because we buy our timber by the meter. Okay? What we call a lineal or linear meter. What this reminds us when we're buying timber is that we are buying the timber by the length, not by the volume of timber, because timber is 3D, so it's got thickness, width, and length. So we're not buying a 3D volume of timber, we're just buying pieces of timber by the meter, by the length. Now, When I go to Bunnings, they sell me timber by the metre, so it might be $4 per metre. What we need to do here is we need to, on the left-hand side, we calculate it in millimetres because that's how we work in woodworking. And then we convert it in our first column into metres. And then we can work out how much it's going to cost in total for our project. Okay? So lineal metres just reminds us we're buying timber by the metre, not by area, not by volume. Okay? So we'll start with my example here. How many lineal metres are needed? We start with some simple truths. I'm making some legs. Each leg is 300 millimetres long. So I can see in green, 300 millimetres long. That's straight from my cutting list. I need 4 of them. Again, quantity straight from my cutting list. So then I apply some maths here. 300 millimetres long by 4 in total means 1,200 millimetres, which is my lineal metres that are needed. Okay, now sorry, I'll go back there. 1,200 millimetres is how long the piece of timber is that I need. Now, reminder up here, lineal metres, we actually need to convert it to metres first. I made that mistake there, and it's very common to do that. You need to get your millimetres and calculate it back into metres, and we do that by dividing by 1,000. You can do it by moving the decimal place 3 times, whichever works for you, but I divide by 1,000 on a calculator, and let's get it right each time. So 1,200 divided by 1,000 gives me an answer of 1.2. Blue matches blue. Okay? Now, we've got how many metres, sorry, I skipped ahead there. We've got how many metres are needed sorted, but the next column across is lineal metres including wastage. Now, wastage. Why do we have wastage? Well, sometimes we make mistakes. Sometimes we cut the timber the wrong length and we need to cut a new piece. Sometimes when we buy a piece of timber, there might be a knot in it or some other sort of defect that we need to cut off. Maybe the timber's got a split in it or twisted or checked or warped, whatever the defect might be, sometimes there are defects. So when we do our calculations, we need to account for wastage. In this project, I've included 5% wastage, but you could use 10%, 20%, depending on how good or bad the quality of the timber is that you're working with and how good or bad your measuring is. Now, I've been doing woodworking for quite a few years now, so I might use a 5% wastage. If this is your first time doing a project, maybe you want to use 10% wastage, so you've got a little bit of extra timber. That means it's going to cost you more money because you're buying more, but at least then you can tell the client, well, I need to spend this much money. So here we go. We've got 1.2 metres of timber is needed, but when we account for offcuts and mistakes in our wastage, we need to add in 5%. So I do 1.2 on my calculator plus 5% gives me 1.26 metres. There we go, purple matches purple. So the next part is, where do I actually find this cost per metre? And when we're thinking about the cost per metre, we can't just pull a number out of thin air. Like I said, you've got to go to your costing sheet. This could be from your supplier, could be going to Bunnings, whatever it might be. But you need to know how to actually work out these costs and how they display their cost. The first thing you need to know is that the price of timber is based on the cross section, so the dimensions of the width and the thickness, and then you buy it by metres of that. So, if you can see here, I've got my little 3D image of a piece of timber. I've got thickness, width, and length in metres. When we purchase our timber, we buy it based on the size of width and thickness. So in my example here, width and thickness, 42 and 42. And then we buy it by the metre. So if I wrote this down, I would write down that I need 1.26 metres of 42 wide by 42 thick radiata pine. Okay, so that's how I would write it down when I make my order. So I need 1.26 metres of 42 by 42. So I then go into my costing sheet and I start with my width and thickness and I go down the list until I get the closest width and thickness. Now luckily 42 by 42 is a standard size, but if I needed 45 by 45, I can't buy 42 by 42 because it's too small. I can always buy bigger timber and reduce it, but I can't buy smaller timber and just make it grow unless I'm planning to join multiple pieces together. For today's task, we're just going to use a size that's readily available, 42 by 42. So I find my 42 by 42, and I have a look. I've got pine here and I've got spotted gum here, so I've got all my pine prices and all my spotted gum prices. But the client has said, or my drawings have said, this is radiata pine, so I'm going to use the pine. My price per metre is $3.30. So 42 by 42, if I buy 1 metre of it, it's going to cost me $3.30. Okay? So that's now my price per metre, my cost per metre. And I put that $3.30 here in this pink column. So I get that information from this sheet here. Now that I've got that, I can do some more math. I get the total length that I need, that's the length including wastage, the blue length, and I multiply it by the cost per metre, the dollar amount in pink there, and that gives me my total cost. So I did 1.26 metres at $3.30, so 1.26 times $3.30 gives me $4.158. Now, I can't spend $4.158, so I might round it up to $4.16, or if I'm using cash, I would have to round that up to $4.20. Okay, so you need to actually do some rounding, okay, depending on what units you're using. I'm using a credit card, so I'm going to use $4.16, so I'm going to buy it rounded up to 2 decimal places. That's how I calculate the cost for one piece. When I'm completing a project, obviously I'm going to have 5, 6, maybe 15, maybe 100 different pieces of timber. I need to do that process for every single piece. Now, it's a lot of work, but like I said earlier, planning correctly means that you're more likely to succeed in your project, less likely to have failures or mistakes. So you need to make sure, spend a lot of time getting your costing right. If at the end of your project, it's coming back that it's going to cost you $500,000, go back and check your maths. I think you've made a mistake there. Maybe you forgot to convert from millimeters to meters. Okay? But you need to make sure if you follow these steps, start with working out the linear meters, then work out linear meters plus wastage, then find the cost per meter from your costing sheet, and then multiply the meters by the cost to get your total cost. At the end of the day, when you're finished, you're going to have lots of rows here. You would add the whole total cost column up to give you total cost for the whole project. Look, I hope that one's been really helpful for you. There's a lot of information in there, so if you get stuck, just go back, pause the video, go back to whichever part you need to make sure you're following along. And if you need any help, just put a comment in, more than happy to help you out with that. Next video coming up is research of existing designs and why it's so important and how we actually use existing designs to help us come up with our own individualized project. Okay? Hope this has been helpful for you. Good luck and look forward to seeing you in the next video.